Okay, random houses, let's go.
James? You man, come.
Hello, James.
We need to speak to James.
James.
Hello.
Not James.
Is this where the study group is?
No. What door number is this?
Study group.
What does it mean to be yourself in 2023? Does it mean breaking into people's homes and terrorizing them for views? Is it purposely crashing an airplane for your YouTube channel and facing up to 20 years in prison? Or is it getting shot in the stomach for repeatedly harassing customers at a grocery store, despite being told time and time again to please stop? In the world of Lars von Trier, the key to unlocking your authentic self is to play the idiot. The idiot is the man of the future, and the key to finding happiness is to let your inner idiot shine. If done correctly, your inner idiot can actually free you from societal obligations and norms. However, what does letting your inner idiot look like, and how do you do it without harming or causing distress to the people around you? This is the question Lars von Trier attempts to answer in his very controversial film, The Idiots. And this movie is currently streaming on Mubi Canada. So Mubi has acquired 11 films by Lars von Trier for its North American audiences, and some are streaming on Mubi right now, and others will roll out through September 2025. Back to The Idiots. The Idiots is a movie that remains highly controversial, and during its screening at the Cannes Film Festival, a year full of movies, famed critic Roger Ebert declared unworthy of winning honestly anything, let alone the grand prize at the Cannes Film Festival. A reporter was actually kicked out during the screening for yelling "sick." So some people have called this movie brilliant, others have called it Euro trash, and an unwatchable wreck of a film. Personally, I've had a very complicated relationship when it comes to Lars von Trier movies. I think he's a human troll. I think he enjoys getting, triggering people, getting a reaction out of people. And he's not someone I actually recommend very lightly. So for those of you who have attempted to watch Lars von Trier movies, let me know what your experience was. Did you finish? If you couldn't finish, let me know where you stopped and we can talk about it. Again, tread lightly here. And so despite the controversy that surrounds a lot of his films, I do think that his movies offer an interesting commentary on filmmaking and just society as a whole. So The Idiots is the first movie Lars von Trier made under Dogma 95. So Dogma 95 is a film movement established by Lars von Trier and fellow Danish filmmaker Thomas Vinterberg, which aimed to provide a greater focus on traditional storytelling and performances in response to what he perceived to be an over-reliance on technology. The goal was to create a new form of honest cinema. All members have to basically undertake this vow of chastity, no artificial lighting, no tacked-on music, and all films have to be made with a handheld camera, and the directors can't actually be credited for their work. And I think what makes The Idiots a special movie or something worth revisiting is the way it kind of commits to an idea that it clearly cannot fully realize. How do you express yourself in a society that is becoming increasingly more politically correct? This is something that Lars von Trier has struggled with in his own work. I think there's a lot of ways he could have depicted the inner idiot. He could have gone the jackass route, right? The group could have committed to harming themselves and coming up with more daredevil stunts. I think that would have been interesting. They could have gone the prankster route as well, coming up with very controlled pranks on a certain sort of sect of society to prove a bigger point. But he doesn't really take any of these options. Why does he choose to depict the inner idiot in the way that he does? So both von Trier's parents actually worked for the social ministry, and his mom actually spent a lot of time looking for places to set up an institution for those who had special needs. His family actually lived in a very wealthy area in Copenhagen, And this area was actually very resistant to having such institutions in their neighborhood. But the question is why? You know, what's the harm? This is something that comes up in the movie a lot. Like it's not like his mother was trying to establish a halfway house for criminals or former criminals or a rehabilitation center. Like, what is it about this group of people, you know, otherwise harmless group of people, that this very posh neighborhood just didn't want anything to do with? And as a society, generally speaking, depending on the society you're from, generally speaking, we're taught to have a level of patience and understanding when someone has a disability, especially a mental disability, because they don't actually know what the boundaries are. And watching this film, you know, you have to wonder, like, this patience and understanding, is it really coming from a place of true compassion, or is it coming from a place of, you know, you don't really want to be shamed or ostracized by society, right? So people just naturally act a lot friendlier, a lot more understanding to someone who is disabled, because, to be honest, if they don't, people are going to give it to you, right? It's just not socially acceptable to behave in that way. And throughout the film, you're kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're like, when are these people going to figure out that they are lying, that these people are in perfect health? You're kind of waiting for this big revelation. They are healthy people pretending to be disabled. And when you're a healthy person, I mean, you know what the boundaries are. You know when you're going too far. And you know exactly what the consequences will be before you kind of start acting in the way that you're acting. Now, whether or not you care, this is the issue. And I will give the group the benefit of the doubt. I think in the beginning, they did have this genuine desire to find happiness and kind of see what life would be like if they didn't have all these societal obligations or all these things kind of tying them down. However, the way in which they use to flesh out their inner idiot, I think it goes to show that finding your authentic self, you know, it looks different for different people. You know, for some people, this actually did help them find some type of inner peace. For other people, it honestly had adverse effects. Like, there's one scene in the movie that's very telling when people who are really disabled come to visit the house. And some members of the group are chilling, they're laughing, they're not taking it too seriously. And then there are other members of the group that are visibly annoyed, angry, frustrated that these people who have special needs have come to visit them. Like, they're almost too bothered by it. And I thought it was interesting because, like, you feel comfortable pretending to have special needs, but you don't really feel comfortable interacting with them. The movie does a good job of kind of giving each person its own little identity as the movie goes on. And so you come to realize that some members of the group, like, their desire to find this inner idiot is disingenuous. And they don't really care about people with special needs any more than the people that they're criticizing, right? Any more than this larger society that pretends to be compassionate and understanding for their own self-preservation or their own self-interest. And the only person that kind of questions this throughout the whole film is this woman named Karen. And this woman, Karen, is very, very random. And she decides to kind of go off and live with them after she coincidentally encounters them at a restaurant wreaking havoc. And so she asks them an interesting question. She asks the leader of the group, she says, how can you justify behaving in this way when there are people who actually suffer from disabilities? And their answer is, honestly, you can't, right? The movie doesn't lie to you in that way. Like, there is no justification for behaving in this way. Like, this is absolutely wild. I thought it was really interesting that Karen could only start to open up to the idea of, you know, pretending to be disabled or pretending to have special needs after she met people with actual special needs. Because before that, she couldn't really rationalize it and really justify it in her head. And in Karen's case, I think it was genuine. And then for the rest of this raggedy group, like, I think their reasons for joining this group or behaving in this way, again, it's not as genuine as it first appears. Like, maybe some of them just like the anonymity. Like, this group kind of has this understanding that whatever happens here stays here. Maybe some people needed a break from their everyday lives. Like, they just needed a place to unwind. Maybe some people are just narcissists. You know, like, you have this leader of this group, this unofficial pseudo leader, and you can tell he kind of gets off on being in charge, right? He likes that position and he likes the hierarchy that he he likes the hierarchy that he's created in this kind of little world that they have. And then you have other people who are predators, right? Cheaters, people looking to escape from their lives, but in the worst way possible. Like there's one member of the group, Axel. He is something else. I mean, this man claims to want to find his, inner idiot, and he's there to spaz, and he's there to, but really he's just there to cheat. As much as this group tries to isolate themselves from the real world, they really can't. In the case of Axel, the woman that he's having an affair with, at some point in time actually comes to visit him at work, and she just starts to spaz. She embarrasses him at work, and this wasn't, the reason she starts to act like she's someone who has special needs isn't to find her inner idiot or connect with her true self. It was to be petty, right? It was to get back at a man that she felt was humiliating her, so she humiliated him right back. The idea that this group has in terms of finding your inner idiot, it's really, it's a noble task, but the reality is they can't really escape the societal norms or expectations that they are trying to escape. And what's worse is they actually set up similar rules within their little community that very much mirror or very much copy the rules and expectations that they're trying to escape, right? They judge each other's spaz, they judge each other's performances. Although they act like they're all on even playing fields, it's very clear that some people have more power than others in terms of decision making. And as much as they want to act like they don't really care what people think, they do. Time and time again, up until the end of the movie, like there are instances where, each member of the group, like their personal lives are threatened in some way. And it's all well and good to act, like you have special needs in front of people that don't know you. But what do you do when that distance between you and that stranger starts to close? And so this young girl in the group, her name is Josephine, her father came to pick her up. This was an opportunity for the group to really put their money where their mouth was. And only 2 members of the group defended her, right? Her father is literally telling her, pack your bags, we have to go. And this young girl is basically saying, I'm happy here, I want to stay here. Even though he's forcing her to stay, they don't really defend her in any way. The pseudo leader of the group says, listen, we can't really force anybody to stay. They were coming up with a lot of reasons as to why they weren't really stepping in the way that you would expect them to. The minute that this idiot world that they've created could seep out into their personal lives, they retreat quite quickly. Not all of them have that discipline. And I think the way they're not able to kind of fully commit to this idea in their own lives, they do understand the difference between right and wrong. And a lot of the members of the group understand that maybe the way in which they're trying to connect with their inner idiot or, connect with themselves is not the right way to do it. And it shows in their performance. The group divides themselves into caretakers and those with special needs. And I think it's kind of an emergency mechanism because they very much know, they're aware of the risk, right? There's a huge consequence if the people that they're acting disabled around find out that they're not disabled. Like this could turn incredibly violent. And there's one scene where I really thought, like, that's the thing about the movie, like nothing happens really until the end. Like you're kind of waiting for them to break character or to someone to just kind of punch them in the face for behaving in this way. And I really thought it was going to happen. So in one scene, they're at a restaurant being annoying, doing what they do. And the member of the group playing the caregiver basically leaves another member of the group who is pretending to have these special needs with these tattooed, gangster-looking group of people. And he just leaves. And so this poor kid who's pretending to have special needs is sitting there. At one point, he tries to leave. And this group of really intimidating looking men, they sit him back down. Because they feel like it's their responsibility to watch him. Like, this young man can't be left alone. We need to watch him until his caregiver returns to him. And at this point in time, you're like, how much longer can this act go on for? I mean, that could have turned into that was like the most tense scene in this whole movie. Because you're like, this could result in murder, right? Like, this could really go off. And so finally, his friend comes back to collect him. And you could tell this young man was shook. right? He runs away. As soon as he's out of this restaurant, he breaks character. And he spends the rest of the day kind of curled up in a corner, wondering why he's, like, what is all this for? And that's the thing with this whole movie. Why are you doing what you're doing? And I think the why lies in, I think this whole idea of the inner idiot, it is kind of brilliant in a way, because you question why we have certain boundaries. Why do we think certain gestures are necessary? Why is it that the distance between people is getting further and further? And a lot of the things that we're doing under the sort of guise of, you know, respecting people's boundaries and being polite or whatever are actually keeping us isolated. They're actually kind of keeping us very alone. We are so afraid, especially nowadays, to offend people, that we just kind of pretend to be something that we're not. People are kind of afraid to be their full self. The more time we spend with this group, you know, you can tell that they don't even really know why they're doing what they're doing, right? Their kind of pranks, the way they're acting, it just gets increasingly aggressive. It gets increasingly mean-spirited. They kind of go from occupying spaces and pushing people's buttons a bit to kind of really getting in their faces, just being rude, just being aggressive, and you're like, y'all really lost the thread on this one. So the group lives in this house, this beautiful house in the suburbs that they think is owned by the pseudo leader of the group, this Stoffer fellow, but actually he doesn't own the house. His uncle gave him the responsibility of selling the house. And there are two scenes in contrast that are really interesting. So a big part of the movie is actually deterring people from buying this home, because a lot of people don't want to live near an institution or a place that caters to people with special needs. And although there are laws in place that actually prevent such institutions from being in a residential neighborhood, no one in their right mind would actually like what kind of person are you? You're really gonna call the police? You're really gonna kick out people who need help? And so the first time, or the first few times they do it, it's very funny, right? Like they kind of test people's boundaries. Like there's this one woman who comes to see the house, and you know, they're pretending that they're caretakers and that they have people from special needs visit, and they're kind of testing this woman. They're saying, okay, like, why do you have a problem with people? Like, why are you so uncomfortable? They're harmless. Look, they're not doing anything. They just want to use your garden 3 to 4 times a day. Like, is there an agreement we can come to? Like, they're doing it in a way that's really funny and really engaging. And the second time they try to deter someone later on in the movie, it's just really aggressive and petty. So someone from the community comes over and basically offers them a money to move somewhere else. They don't have that same level of humility or fun that they once had, and they're trying to scare this man, right? They take jumper cables and they hook up one of the young men pretending to be disabled, basically saying, you know, electroshock therapy is really good for people who have mental disabilities, and this is in really bad taste. And at this point in time, you can tell that this is just an act. This is when it turns offensive, right? Like this is when you can kind of see that maybe that their reasons not as altruistic as they would like to believe. Like they're not really much better than the people they think that they're trying to criticize. So eventually the group reaches a total breaking point. So everybody decides to go their separate ways when Stoffer, the sort of leader of the group, basically challenges everyone to go off and spaz in front of their friends, families, their co-workers, and this will prove that they're serious. He's judging, and he would never do it either. And of course, everyone's looking at him like, this is just an experiment. We will never do this in our real lives. The cheater said he's not willing to break up his family, and the doctor was like, I obviously can't do this at work. Like, these are all professional working people. So at the end of the day, they have reputations to uphold, and doing this just isn't really in their best interests. And the only person who, besides Karen, who takes up the challenge is the professor. And this scene is so awkward because he really did want to spaz in front of his students. And there is that kind of, what happens if these worlds collide? And so he goes off to teach his class, and the group is all there looking at him, and he can't do it. He doesn't even attempt to do it, right? He's literally frozen because he's in his real profession, he's in his real job, his students are looking at him, It's disrespectful, right? There's no way he can behave in that way without disrespecting everybody in front of him and disrespecting himself. And that level of self-preservation kicks in so fast that he can't even try to do it, right? He doesn't even pretend to do it. And of course, they're all looking at him like, you didn't even try. And this man says something interesting. He's like, I guess I didn't have any pride in my inner idiot. That's the root cause. You know, that's what eventually causes their downfall. It's all well and good to act this way in front of strangers, but eventually you got to look people in the face. And if you can't really do that, it means maybe you're not, the reasons that you say you're doing this aren't as sincere as you would like us to believe. And so at that point in time, the professor decides, I'm not going back with y'all. I'm going back to my real job. Like, this is crazy. Like, this is like, the joke is up. You know, the gig is up. It was fun for a while, but I don't want to do this anymore. For most people in the group, this was an experiment, right? I think they wanted to see, you know, if I act like this for a period of time, will this have a positive life? Will this have a positive effect on my daily life? Whether it be personal, whether it be professional. Like, does behaving in this way make you a better teacher, doctor, artist? Who knows? And for other people in the group, it was a mechanism to escape their own reality. And this was the case with Karen. So as I mentioned earlier, she decides to live with the group almost randomly after coincidentally bumping into them. No one in the group asks where she's from, why she's here. And we only get one glimpse into her life. And that's when she makes a phone call back home. And you kind of get the sense that she's someone running away from something. That's because she recently lost a child and she disappeared, or she went off with the group the night before she was supposed to be attending her child's funeral. Like, when you watch the movie back, it's kind of a miracle that she doesn't have a breakdown or she doesn't explode, right? Like, she just stays neutral. She seems way too level-headed, and her character is a bit of a tease because you can tell that when she first clocks into the fact that these guys are just acting and they did all this to skip paying a bill, like, she was a bit shocked. And initially I assumed that we would be seeing things through her eyes, that she would be the person that would make sense of this nonsense, that maybe she would call them out or expose them. But instead she partakes, right? She starts to behave in a similar fashion to the point where she actually disappears. Like, you forget that she's actually even there. Like, the personalities in this group take over and there's no main character, right? So you're left kind of trying to make sense of this mess on your own. Like, we don't really have someone to guide us through it step by step. And this is really confusing because the way the movie sets up, you think that something crazy is going to happen, or more crazy than what does happen. You assume that the reason that this group is not together is because of something Karen has done. So it's set up in this weird documentary style. And each member, like, a lot of the members of the group are looking back on their time, you know, searching for their inner idiot. And they all mention Karen. They basically mentioned that she just seemed like someone in a bad place. She seemed like someone who was willing to go off with anyone. And in fact, out of all the members of the group, she was the one that needed them the most. And so the whole time they're talking about Karen, or she comes up, you just assume that the reason they're no longer together is because of something that she did. And of course you come to realize that it has nothing to do with her. She would have stayed in this house, it seems, indefinitely. That's the crazy, like, she had no intention of leaving. Like, she was there, she was comfortable, she didn't want to go. There were no signs of her wanting to leave. And the only reason she decides to leave is because the group disbands, right? They're like, listen, it's time to go back to our regular lives. This was fun, but this is so unrealistic. And so Karen is the only one that's really sad, right? She's the only one she really doesn't want to go back to her real life. And at the end of the movie, we realize why. And so before everybody leaves, she says something really nice about every member of the group. She tells the group that she wants to try to bring out her inner idiots in her real life. And she chooses Suzanne to come with her, right? She needs a member of the group to come and witness this. And she even warns Suzanne that, like, listen, this might not be pretty. You know, like, I'm just warning you, but I would love for you to come and witness my becoming, right? Like, basically she's like, girl, you want to come? And Suzanne was like, sure, I would love to come. And this last scene, I think, is what kind of redeems the movie a lot, because Throughout the film, there are moments where, again, reality creeps in. And the last scene is like we're fully in the real world. So they knock on her door and the vibe is off. Her mother opens it. She sees Karen. She's kind of disgusted, but also relieved. And Suzanne is just standing there like, what did I just get myself into, right? She's shocked. She's dismayed. And the whole family is looking at Karen like a ghost, right? They can't believe that she's in front of them. She's been missing for apparently 2 weeks. And they assumed something bad happened because who would miss their child's funeral? So Karen and her husband recently lost a child. And this family is mourning that. And they do seem like a house in mourning. Like everybody just seems low and down. And Karen, she commits to the inner idiot as soon as she walks in the house. She's way too jovial. She's way too upbeat. And I'm glad she brought Suzanne with her, because you could tell she was just like, how do I stop this? Like, damn. And I wonder what was going through her head, because it's all well and good to facilitate a space for people to come and be themselves, but you're also responsible for that person. You are responsible in terms of asking them questions. No one asked her where she's from. Nobody asked her like why she's here. Nobody thought to ask her, right? And as a result of that, her family thought she was dead. And so whose fault is that? You know, whose responsibility is that? You know, is that Karen's? Or it kind of makes you wonder about the rest of the group, because it's like, why are you guys really here? And is your presence here hurting somebody else? And there's one moment where Karen is looking at a picture of her child, and it dawns on Suzanne that like, this is serious. You know, this is very sad, and she's crying. And this is clearly a woman that's still in mourning. This is clearly a woman that was not really ready to face what was in front of her. And Suzanne doesn't know what to do, right? It seems like Karen is fully committed to unleashing her inner idiot. And that last scene, when she starts to spaz while eating cake, I couldn't believe my eyes. You know, her husband just slapped her in the face, and there was no like Karen was not hesitant at all. If you compare it to the professor, like there isn't any, should I do this? Should I not? Instead, she fully commits to it. She had that intention and she did it. And whether or not that's a side effect of the mourning or whether or not there's something else there, we're not really sure. Like the movie leaves it open. And eventually Suzanne just stops, right? She's like, listen, that's enough. We're gonna leave. And this movie is really funny because when she said, you know, that's enough, I'm like, now that's enough? Now, like, is that really what we're doing, guys? I think the ending really brought it back into the real world. Like when they're in this house and they're being whoever they want to be, and you know, they got Danish flags while they're engaging in group activities, we'll say, you know, they feel free, they feel fine, but that same freedom is really hard to replicate in your real life. Lars von Trier, he doesn't have an answer for this, but I think he has some hope that maybe somebody will. Like whatever your inner idiot looks like, obviously it shouldn't be like this, but you know, maybe there is a way to reconcile or bring this idea to full realization. Thinking about Karen, and you know, this woman was in a very desperate situation, and this is someone who is shackled by obligations to her family. You know, being a mother, she had all these things that were attached to her, and being in this house, it kind of liberated her from these freedoms. And I was reading an interview in The Guardian, like Lars von Trier is actually, he grew up with very open-minded, like super open-minded atheist parents. He grew up going to demonstrations, and he said that actually the level of freedom that he had as a child was a bit suffocating. It felt like he was living in a bit of a prison, and so he was always looking for something to kind of give himself some borders or some type of boundary within himself. His parents' sort of lack of faith actually it made him interested in faith. It made him interested in religion. Like he's not actually a religious person, clearly, but his parents' sort of lack of like they were serious atheists, and this was something that was very important to them. So he has this hope that there is something out there, right? Like hopefully there's more. In an interview with The Guardian, he cites a man named Steiner who set up a school for people with Down syndrome. He said that they were angels, not in the sense that they were very good, but in the sense that they were sent from God and that they were a different breed. And so Lars von Trier's he never suffered from any disability, but he actually went through a huge mental breakdown when his mother told him before he died that his father wasn't actually his biological father. And so he grew up thinking he was different. And this kind of created this underdog mentality in him. And so when that identity was stripped from him, he didn't know what to do. He was left back to the drawing board, and he didn't really know where to start. I think this idea of finding your authentic self, or at least, creating it in some way, is very much illustrated in this movie. And although the group cannot fully commit to the idea of the inner idiot, they can't take it into their daily life, they commit to it for as long as possible. And they all have their different reasons, but the time period in which they are behaving in this way, they really do commit to it. And maybe it is a commentary on people really need to believe in something, regardless of how crazy that may seem. And maybe that's the key to finding your authentic self, right? Believing in something despite everything else saying that you clearly shouldn't believe in it. That's kind of what I got from the movie. What does it look like to be yourself, or find yourself in 2023? Obviously without pranking people or crashing planes or whatever it is people are doing for views and money nowadays. That's up in the air. And so you guys let me know what you think, and until next time.